August 23, 1990, West Houston. A security guard was running his routine patrol through a remote stretch of undeveloped land near Enclave Parkway, the kind of area where the city faded out into trees and shadows and long stretches of nothing. Locals had a name for it. They called it Lover's Lane. He noticed a white Honda Civic parked in a cul-de-sac near the 1300 block of Enclave Parkway. It hadn't moved in hours. He approached the vehicle. Through the window he could see a purse on the passenger side floorboard. He traced the plates back to a family. That family had already filed a missing persons report earlier that morning. Their daughter hadn't shown up for work, and nobody could reach her or her boyfriend. Police were called. They searched the surrounding area. Cheryl Henry, 22 years old, was found in a nearby wooded area. Her body had been hidden under wooden boards. Her boyfriend, Garland Andrew Atkinson, 21 years old, known to everyone as Andy, was found 100 to 150 yards away, tied to a tree. Both had their hands bound behind their backs. Both had their throats cut with a knife. Cheryl had been sexually assaulted. The Harris County medical examiner ruled both deaths homicides caused by sharp force injuries to the neck. During Cheryl's autopsy, investigators collected biological samples and performed a full sexual assault examination. They preserved everything carefully. They had no suspect, no identified motive, no clear direction. What they had was physical evidence, biological material, and the determination to find whoever had done this. It would take 35 years, but the evidence they preserved that morning in 1990 never stopped being relevant. The last confirmed sighting of Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson was the evening of August 22, 1990. Cheryl, her sister, and Andy had spent part of the evening together at Bayou Mama's nightclub on Westheimer Road in West Houston. At some point during the night, Cheryl's sister left. Cheryl and Andy stayed together. They had been dating only a few weeks. Investigators believe the couple drove to the remote area near Enclave Parkway sometime that night. They were killed there. The following morning, when Cheryl failed to show up for work, her family started calling. No answer. A missing persons report was filed. Hours later, the security guard found the car. Based on what investigators pieced together from the crime scene, they believe Parrott approached the couple, restrained them, and killed Atkinson first, cutting his throat. He then tied up Cheryl Henry, sexually assaulted her, and killed her the same way. Blood was found in the vehicle as well as at the scene. Houston Police Department homicide detectives responded immediately. They processed the scene, collected evidence, and began working what would become one of the most closely watched unsolved cases in the city's history. In the weeks and months following the murders, HPD worked the case hard. They interviewed anyone connected to Cheryl and Andy. They canvassed the area. They followed leads. One retired HPD homicide detective, John Belk, who worked the Lover's Lane case for years before retiring in 2009, would later say he personally looked at more than 36 potential suspects during his time on the case. None of them matched. The biological evidence from Cheryl's sexual assault examination had been preserved. In 1990, DNA technology was in its earliest stages, exciting and promising, but not yet capable of what it would eventually become. Investigators knew what they had. They believed even then that it would eventually matter. "We had DNA," Belk said years later, and back in 1990 that was an exciting new technology. The case went cold. It never closed, but without a viable suspect, forward momentum stalled. In the early 2000s, investigators returned to the evidence with new technology. They ran DNA comparisons against at least 24 potential suspects. Every single one came back negative. In 2001, a letter was sent to police offering information about the case. Investigators followed up. It led nowhere. Through the 2000s and into the 2010s, HPD cold case investigators continued revisiting the file, exploring new possibilities, working new angles as they became available. As forensic science advanced, they tried newer tools, including familial DNA searching, which scans databases for partial matches that might point to relatives of an unknown suspect. That too produced no breakthrough. More than 100 suspects looked at over 35 years. Every one of them cleared. The right name never appeared on the list, not once, until a single phone call changed everything. In the summer of 1990, Floyd William Parrott was 28 years old and living in the Houston area. A May 1990 arrest report described him as 6 feet tall, 185 pounds, with brown hair and a mustache. He had a fixation on law enforcement, not on becoming a legitimate officer, on impersonating one. He had been doing it for years, and the Harris County court system had already encountered him multiple times. In May 1988, he was arrested for impersonating a police officer and placed on probation. He violated the terms and spent 9 months in jail. In December 1988, he was arrested for carrying a weapon, specifically a blue steel revolver. He was convicted. Court records show the revolver was later returned to him. In May 1990, he was arrested again for impersonating a police officer. He was out on bond for that charge when on June 20th, 1990, a woman in Houston was sexually assaulted. The victim provided investigators with a physical description of her attacker, height, build, appearance, that matched Parrott. She also described a blue steel revolver. DNA was collected from that case. Nobody connected it to Parrott at the time. 2 months later, on the night of August 22nd, 1990, Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson drove toward Lover's Lane. Court records confirmed that at the time of the murders, Parrott was working approximately 1 mile from where the bodies were found. He knew the terrain. He had reason to be in the area, and he was out on bond, free to move through West Houston on a warm August night. 1 mile from the scene, out on bond, with a pattern that investigators would later say extended from the late 1980s through the 2000s. He was right there. The system just didn't know to look for him yet. 1 week after the murders, 1 week, Parrott pleaded guilty to the May 1990 impersonation charge and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. He walked into custody. The Lover's Lane file stayed open. Nobody made the connection. After his release, Parrott continued the same behavior. In 1996, he was driving a vehicle equipped with emergency lights on the Southwest Freeway near Chimney Rock when he pulled the driver over. He told the driver he would waive the ticket in exchange for $100. When police searched his car and home, they found badges from multiple law enforcement agencies, including the U.S. Marshal's Office, a driver's license with his photo under a different name, a light bar, and police radios. He was convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison in September 1995 for that offense. He served just over 3 years and released on parole in 1999. Also in 96, Parrott was charged with a sexual assault. He claimed the encounter was consensual. A grand jury did not indict him on the charge, but DNA was collected from him in connection with that case. That DNA sample existed in the system. It was attached to his name, but it had not yet been entered into CODIS, the FBI's combined DNA index system, where it could be compared against evidence from other cases nationwide. That detail would prove to be enormously significant. The Harris County DA's office would later say that Parrott impersonated law enforcement from the late 1980s through the 1990s and into the 2000s, in different cars, using different credentials, in different circumstances. Investigators believed he used the false authority of a badge to approach and control people. A man with flashing lights and a badge could pull a car over on a dark road, could approach a couple parked in a remote area, and present himself as having legitimate authority. Nobody confirmed exactly how Floyd Parrott approached Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson on the night of August 22, 1990, but investigators who spent years on the case had a clear theory about how it likely began. Public records show Parrott owned property in New Caney, Texas, east of Houston, until as recently as 2020. At some point after that, he left the state entirely. He relocated to Lincoln, Nebraska. The DA would later describe it as hiding out, a man putting distance between himself and everything that had happened, believing that enough time and enough miles would eventually make him safe. In late 2025, a homicide sergeant with the Houston Police Department was assigned to the Lover's Lane cold case file. He hadn't had it long, a matter of months, when a tip came in. A tipster who provided their name and contact information named Floyd William Parrott as a possible suspect in the murders of Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson. The detective followed up directly with the tipster to confirm the details. Using Parrott's name, the detective located the 1996 police report, the sexual assault case where Parrott had been identified as the suspect and claimed consent. The case that had been no-billed by a grand jury, the case where DNA had been collected. The DNA sample had recently been uploaded to CODIS. Investigators ran a comparison between that profile and the biological evidence collected from Cheryl Henry's sexual assault examination during her 1990 autopsy. CODIS returned a match. The same male DNA profile also matched evidence from the June 20th, 1990 sexual assault, the one that had occurred just 2 months before the Lover's Lane murders. The one whose victim had described a man matching Parrott's exact description, carrying a blue steel revolver. 2 cases, the same DNA, the same man. Investigators then confirmed that Parrott had not been in custody on the dates of any of the 3 crimes. The June 1990 assault, the August 1990 murders, or the August 1996 assault, he had been free each time. His work address in 1990 placed him 1 mile from the crime scene. After reviewing the original offense reports, the DNA evidence, and all supporting documents, detectives determined that they had their man. The DNA from a 1996 case that went nowhere had been in existence for nearly 30 years. It just hadn't been in the right database. Once it was uploaded, once that one step was taken, the match came back. The answer had been available the whole time. It was just waiting to be asked. On March 25, 2026, Houston Police Department detectives and FBI agents traveled to Lincoln, Nebraska. They located Floyd William Parrott, now 64 years old. They interviewed him. He denied ever knowing Cheryl Henry. Then they arrested him. The FBI SWAT team took him into custody that night. He was charged with 2 counts of capital murder in Harris County, Texas, 1 count for Cheryl Henry, 1 count for Andy Atkinson. He was booked into the Lancaster County Jail in Lincoln to await extradition proceedings. He refused to waive his extradition rights and was scheduled for a court hearing on April 30th. The following day, Harris County District Attorney Sean Tier held a press conference in Houston. He confirmed the charges and described the moment plainly. These unsolved murders had weighed so incredibly heavy on these families and our communities for more than 3 decades. That stops today. Tier also made a public appeal. He told the gathered reporters and cameras that investigators believed Parrott had committed numerous other crimes over the years, that there were people out there who had been victimized by him and might not even know his name. He asked anyone who had encountered Parrott, anyone he had pulled over, anyone he had approached, to call the DA's office directly. In the days following the arrest, new survivors came forward. Cheryl Henry's younger sister Shane spoke at the press conference. She said she had long assumed the killer was dead, that after 36 years without an arrest, there was no other explanation for why he had never been caught. Learning he was alive and in custody was something she had stopped allowing herself to expect. She also shared something painful. Cheryl's mother had passed away. Andy Atkinson's father had passed away. Neither of them lived to see this day. It's heartbreaking that they don't get to have this day, Shane said. But we know they're with them and rejoicing in their own ways. Floyd William Parrott did not make it back to Houston. On the morning of April 28, 2026, 34 days after his arrest, jail staff at the Lancaster County facility went to check on Parrott. When he failed to emerge from his cell, they found him unresponsive. Life-saving measures were administered. Paramedics responded. Parrott was pronounced dead at the scene. District Attorney Tier told reporters the cause of death appeared to be suicide. The families of Cheryl Henry and Andy Atkinson would not get a trial. They would not get a verdict read in a courtroom. They would not watch a sentence handed down. A family friend named Con, who had known Cheryl, said it plainly. The only reason Parrott took his own life, he said, was because he knew what he had done. There was no question marks anymore. He had spent 35 years thinking he had gotten away. And when the knock came on his door in Nebraska, he understood that he hadn't. The DA's office released a statement. Floyd William Parrott thought he could outrun the truth. He thought time would erase his past. But prosecutors and investigators never stopped working the Lover's Lane cold case. Parrott murdered Andy and Cheryl. He violently assaulted others and spent decades thinking he got away with it. Parrott's death does not erase his crimes or end our motivation. 34 days, that's how long he sat in that jail cell in Nebraska with everything that was coming. He didn't want to face it, so he didn't. Investigators also confirmed they were actively pursuing a cold case in Louisiana they believed may be connected to Parrott. The DA's statement made clear that his death was not the end of the investigation, only the end of one chapter of it. The stretch of land near Enclave Parkway in West Houston bears no resemblance today to what it was in August 1990. The remote, undeveloped area where Cheryl and Andy were found has been absorbed entirely by the expanding city. There is no quiet cul-de-sac anymore, no stretch of darkness where a car could sit unnoticed. But inside an evidence facility, the biological samples collected during Cheryl Henry's autopsy had waited. carefully preserved through 35 years of changing technology, changing investigators, changing administrations, connected always to the same case and same two names. Investigators ran DNA comparisons against more than 100 suspects over those decades. Every one of them cleared. The right name never appeared, not until someone made a phone call in late 2025, and the newly assigned detective spent a matter of months connecting the dots that had been sitting in various files for years. The DNA from a 1996 sexual assault case recently uploaded to CODIS matched in seconds to evidence from 1990. That was all it took in the end. One upload, one comparison, one result. Cheryl Henry was 22 years old. Andy Atkinson was 21. They went out together on a summer night in Houston, a young couple, just a few weeks into something new. They never came home. Story 2, Aileen Seiden. April 23, 2018, Franklin County, Florida. A couple heading to a nearby fishing pond made a discovery along a stretch of Highway 98. A body in a roadside ditch, partially concealed, left there like something disposable. Lieutenant Ronnie Jones, then with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, was one of the first investigators on the scene. What he found was unlike anything he had encountered in his career. The woman was covered in bruises from head to toe, lacerations on her face, her stomach, her legs, evidence of extreme sustained violence. The medical examiner would later say the injuries reminded him of those typically seen in high-speed motor vehicle crashes. She had not been in a car crash. She had been beaten to death. The next day, investigators identified her. Her name was Aileen Seiden. She was 31 years old and had come from Miami. She had no obvious connection to Franklin County, Florida. A quiet stretch of Gulf Coast known locally as the Forgotten Coast. Population small, crime rare. The kind of place where something like this simply did not happen. She wasn't from here. She didn't live here. She was just left here. And Franklin County would carry her name for years. Within 24 hours of finding Eileen's body, investigators were called to a second scene. The Sportsman's Lodge Motel in nearby East Point, room 15. Housekeepers had gone in to clean and found the furniture knocked over, blood soaking through the mattress, a smell of vinegar hanging in the air. A luminol test for traces of human blood revealed what a hasty cleanup had failed to hide. The entire bathroom lit up. 2 crime scenes, 1 victim, and somewhere out there, whoever had done this. Aileen Seiden had grown up in Miami. She lost her mother to cancer when she was just 9 years old. 6 years later, her father died of a heart attack. At 22, her older sister Francesca signed the legal papers and became her guardian, taking on the role of parent while still finishing her own schooling and working full-time. By her late 20s, Aileen had built an independent life. She worked as a property manager, she paid her own rent, she had a good apartment with a circle of people who loved her. Her best friend, who asked to be identified only as Allie, described her as strong, determined, and self-sufficient. In 2016, Aileen visited her sister Francesca in Los Angeles and stayed for an extended period. Francesca would later say she wished Aileen had never gone back to Miami, because when she did, she reconnected with someone she had known since high school. His name was Zachary Abel. Zachary Abel and Aileen Seiden had known each other since their teen years in Miami. When they reconnected in 2017, they began dating, but secretly, because Abel was already in a relationship. He had been with a woman named Christina Araujo for approximately 4 years. The two were also business partners running a used car dealership together. Abel tried to end things with Araujo. According to people who knew him, he struggled to make a clean break. Araujo was controlling, they said, and she made threats. She had a father who was a high-ranking officer with the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, and she made clear on multiple occasions that she believed his connections would make problems disappear. When Abel finally tried to end the relationship, Araujo came back with an unexpected proposal. Rather than accept the breakup, she suggested the three of them enter into a relationship together, what is sometimes called a throuple. Aileen was against the idea. She said absolutely not. There was a period of silence, and then, for reasons her friends struggled to understand, she changed her mind. The arrangement didn't work. Before long, there was jealousy, volatility, and escalating conflict. According to Allie, Abel was physically abusive toward Aileen. She would call her friend after incidents, show up with bruises, beg her not to go to the police. Aileen feared that Christina's father's law enforcement connections would be used against her if she did. "Someone's going to end up dead," Allie told her friend directly. "You need to leave." Aileen couldn't. By early 2018, the three were living together, working together and sleeping together. Aileen had lost her property management job the previous year and had become financially dependent on Abel and Araujo. She was trapped. She knew it too. She told Allie she felt like a sex slave. She said Abel had a different look in his eye, a scary one. She was trying to get out. She just needed a little more time. She didn't have it. On April 7, 2018, Abel and Araujo got into a violent fight. Allie says she received a call from Aileen on Abel's phone. The plan, she says, was for Aileen to get Abel out of the house, go somewhere neutral, let things cool down. Instead, Araujo threatened to report the car they were driving as stolen. Aileen and Abel hit the gas and drove to Georgia. Aileen had no phone, no wallet, no plan. Araujo responded with a storm of text messages, more than 150 in roughly 24 hours, all going unanswered. She threatened, she pleaded, she told Abel he had crossed her and she would cross him back. Then, about 48 hours into the trip, with Abel and Aileen headed toward Texas, Araujo's tone shifted. She texted that she wanted them to come home, that she forgave them, that her love for them was unconditional. For reasons that remain unclear, Abel invited her to join them instead. Araujo flew to Dallas. The throuple reunited on the road, and immediately, Allie says, the calls from Aileen started again. Things were getting bad. She didn't know what to do. By day 10 of the road trip, Aileen's sister Francesca had grown alarmed. She hadn't heard from Aileen in days. When the trio stopped in New Orleans, Aileen finally called, and what she said stopped Francesca cold. "I think they're going to kill me." Francesca told her to run, to find a gas station, tell someone, call 911. Aileen said she couldn't, and then she had to go. She hung up. Francesca had no address, no way to reach her, nothing she could do. The road trip continued into its second week. The trio passed through Pensacola, and then on the evening of April 21st, a missed exit brought them to Franklin County, the Forgotten Coast. They stopped at a local restaurant called the Red Pirate. They played miniature golf. They partied. On the recommendation of a local, they headed to the Sportsman's Lodge Motel and reserved the last available room for the night, room 15. The next morning, April 22nd, the three of them decided to stay another day. They went to the liquor store. Surveillance footage later showed all three of them there, and purchased large bottles of vodka and Fireball whiskey, the largest bottles available. That afternoon, Allie says she spoke to Aileen. Aileen told her she needed to leave. She and Allie had made a plan. Aileen would get on a bus from Tampa, the trio's next destination, and Allie had already bought her a ticket. The bus would take her close to Miami. Allie would pick her up. Aileen just needed to get there. She never did. That night, back in Fort Lauderdale, a boat captain named Mike Pickavet heard a knock at his door. He had known all three of them for years, met Abel and Araujo at a bar nearly a decade earlier. Later met Aileen when Abel introduced them. Abel and Araujo were at the door. Where was Aileen? She ran away, Christina Araujo said. Mike didn't believe it. He looked at Abel. Abel started to cry. She's dead, Abel told him. He said he woke up and she was next to him. He tried to give her CPR. He wanted to call 911. Araujo said no. Mike Pickavet feared what would happen if he called authorities directly. He was afraid for his own safety. He thought of the one person Araujo had always claimed could make her problems go away. Her father. While Abel and Araujo slept, Mike went online and searched for Colonel Tony Araujo of the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. He found a number. He made the call. He told the colonel that his daughter had killed someone. Christina Araujo had spent years telling people her father could make her problems disappear. She was right about his reach. She was wrong about how he would use it. Colonel Tony Araujo did not cover for his daughter. He directed Mike to come to him, then took him to the sheriff's office to make a formal statement. Hours later, police descended on Pickavet's home. Abel and Araujo were arrested as they were about to leave. Mike Pickavet was the one who identified the body. The battered woman found in the ditch off Highway 98 was his friend, Aileen Seiden. The arrest happened in April 2018. Due to complications of having two defendants and delays caused by the pandemic, it would be nearly 6 years before the case went to trial. In May 2023, Christina Araujo accepted a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and agreed to testify against Abel. At trial, she became the prosecution's star witness and the only person who claimed to know what actually happened inside room 15 that night. Araujo testified that the three of them had been drinking heavily when Aileen posed a question to her. A seemingly innocent "guess what?" and before she could finish the sentence, Abel was on his feet. He went after Aileen immediately, she said. She claims she tried to intervene at points during the attack and eventually stopped it. She said she fell asleep and woke up to find Aileen dead. Abel's defense attorney argued it was Araujo who had killed Aileen, that she had been driven by jealousy over losing Abel, that the threatening texts she sent during the road trip were effectively a confession of intent, and that Abel had been manipulated and coerced into helping cover up her crime. The jury deliberated for approximately 5 hours. They found Zachary Abel guilty of second-degree murder, the same charge to which Christina Araujo had already pleaded guilty. They could not agree that the killing was premeditated. In April 2024, Abel was sentenced to life in prison. In October 2024, Christina Araujo was sentenced to 25 years. There was one more remarkable moment at Abel's trial. His mother, Kim Clark, had traveled from South Florida to testify on his behalf. She was not allowed in the courtroom during the trial itself because she was a listed witness. The day before she was scheduled to testify, a friend returned to her motel room and found her dead. She had been in poor health for months. She never got to say what she came to say. 6 years of waiting, a mother who died the day before she could speak for her son, a friend who spent years wondering if he helped cover up a murder or protected an innocent man, and a woman left in a ditch on a Florida highway who just wanted to get on a bus home. At Christina Araujo's sentencing, her father, Colonel Tony Araujo, a 42-year veteran of law enforcement, stood before the court and spoke. He said there had been no agreement, no deal, no benefit extended to his daughter because of his position. He had not used his influence to protect her. When Mike Pickavett called him that night in Fort Lauderdale, he did what a law enforcement officer does. He coordinated her arrest. "You will own up to the truth," he told his daughter after learning what she had done. "You will accept responsibility. You will be the voice of the victim. You will testify under oath in a court of law." She did. And whatever her role in Aileen's death, whatever the full truth of Room 15 is, Christina Araujo is serving 25 years for it. Zachary Abel is serving life. Aileen Seiden was 31 years old. She had survived losing both parents before she was 15. She had built an independent life in Miami from almost nothing. She was trying to get out of a dangerous situation and had a bus ticket waiting for her. She never made it to the bus. Aileen Seiden, 1986 to 2018. Story 3, Sarah Harris. It was the morning of January 26, 2022, in Clarksburg, Maryland. Dr. James Ryan called 911 and reported that his girlfriend was unresponsive on the floor of the home they shared. He told the dispatcher he was performing CPR. He said it had happened before, that she had overdosed before and he had revived her. This time, he said, it wasn't working. When first responders arrived, they found 25-year-old Sarah Harris on the floor. She was not breathing. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Around the house, investigators found the kind of paraphernalia that told a story, but not immediately a clear one. Drug vials, syringes, tourniquets, IV bags, and saline solution. The professional-grade equipment of a medical setting, laid out in the rooms of a private home. Dr. Ryan was a 50-year-old oral surgeon practicing in Germantown, Maryland. He told investigators what he believed had happened. Sarah had struggled with mental health issues. She had stolen drugs from his office before. She had a history of injecting herself. He had tried to stop her. He had tried to help her. He had done CPR and called 911. Investigators logged what they found, accepted the account of the doctor at the scene, and listed Sarah's manner of death as undetermined. They left the house without securing it as a crime scene. He was a doctor. He had an explanation. He spoke the language, and for a while, it worked. But Sarah Harris's family did not accept it, and one of them was about to do something that would change everything. Sarah Harris had grown up in suburban Maryland, the second of 4 children in a close family. She was bright and driven. She spoke German, Spanish, Russian, and sign language. She excelled academically, put enormous pressure on herself, and dreamed of becoming a doctor. She also struggled. From her mid-teens onward, she dealt with anxiety and depression. In college, she experimented with drugs and had difficulty moderating her moods. As a young adult, she competed in beauty pageants and modeling. She won the Miss Maryland Petite pageant in 2020, and she maintained a close circle of friends and a particularly tight bond with her mother, Tina, and her older sister, Rachel. In the summer of 2020, Sarah went to an oral surgery practice in Germantown for a routine procedure to have her wisdom teeth removed. The surgeon was Dr. James Ryan. A few weeks after the procedure, Ryan began texting Sarah. He asked how she was doing. He sent her messages with emojis. He mentioned he was looking to hire a surgical assistant and suggested she might be a good fit. There was no formal interview. He told her to just come in. Tina Harris found it a little unusual, but didn't read danger into it. Her daughter was getting a good opportunity to learn. By early 2021, Sarah and Ryan were in a romantic relationship. He was 50 years old, she was 25. He was twice her age, divorced with 3 grown children, and already involved with another woman with whom he had a baby. Within months, Sarah had moved into Ryan's home in Clarksburg. What followed, according to prosecutors in the text messages that would later become central evidence, was a controlled and methodical destruction of a young woman's independence. In the months after Sarah's death, her sister Rachel made a decision. She knew there was more to what had happened than an accidental overdose. She sat down with Sarah's laptop and spent 2 days figuring out her sister's password. She got in. What she found was a trove of text messages between Sarah and James Ryan, stretching back through their entire relationship. Rachel photographed them, printed them, and compiled them into a 200-page binder. She added photographs she had taken on 2 separate occasions when she and her mother had visited Sarah at Ryan's home and found the situation deeply alarming. Drug vials, needles, IV equipment, bloody footprints on the kitchen floor, Sarah barely coherent and covered in needle marks from wrist to elbow. Rachel gave the binder to Montgomery County Police in February 2022. It landed on the desk of Detective Ian Iacoviello, a 33-year-old veteran nearing retirement who specialized in pharmaceutical investigations. He came in alone on a Sunday, his birthday, and opened the binder. What he read, he would later say, was like watching a murder in slow motion. The text began early in their relationship. Within the first month, Ryan was offering to inject Sarah with a fast-acting substance to eliminate her anxiety. 6 seconds, he wrote. It will work completely. He had already decided. He already had the drugs. Over the following months, the text showed a pattern. Sarah developing a dependency. Sarah asking Ryan for more. Ryan providing it. Ketamine, propofol, diazepam, surgical anesthetics used under strict protocols in operating rooms, drugs that suppress breathing, drugs that can be lethal in combination. In December 2021, Ryan texted Sarah, "Just went to change after I gave you ketamine just now." He had injected her while she was asleep. No monitoring, no safety protocols, no emergency equipment on hand. On January 25, 2022, the day before Sarah was found dead, Ryan responded to her request for drugs. "Yes, I will bring some home. I love you, baby." He signed it with love. The next morning she was on the floor. The autopsy confirmed what the text suggested. Sarah Harris died from a toxic combination of ketamine and diazepam in her system. The drugs that killed her were the same drugs her boyfriend had been providing her for over a year. Detective Iacoviello's investigation uncovered a picture of Ryan's relationship with Sarah that went beyond drug supply. It was, prosecutors were later argued, a deliberate and sustained campaign of control. Sarah's mother, Tina, recalled a moment on a family trip to Key West in September 2021, months before Sarah's death, when a drunk Ryan revealed something deeply disturbing. He told the family he had first noticed Sarah when she was just 14 years old. He had seen her playing at a park near his neighborhood and had deliberately sought out places where she worked, a toy store, a restaurant, so he could be around her. He had been watching her for over a decade before she came to his dental office as a patient. Tina and Rachel had also visited Sarah at Ryan's home twice in the months before her death. On the first visit in October 2021, they found the house in a state that Tina described as hell. Drug vials and needles covering the floor, bloody paper towels, Sarah at the door barely able to stand, slurring her words, her arms covered in needle marks. She weighed significantly less than she had when she first met Ryan. She had gone from 120 pounds to, by the time of her death, just 83 pounds. When Tina confronted Ryan directly, he admitted he had been giving Sarah drugs, but only, he claimed, to keep her from getting them elsewhere. Tina told him to end the relationship. He said he would. He didn't. Rachel made a second visit to the home in December 2021. The situation was worse. She photographed everything she found and left without speaking to Sarah, too distressed to stay. On January 8, 2022, 18 days before Sarah's death, Sarah's brother Christopher died of a heart attack in Montana. He was 38 years old. Tina had to make the decision to remove him from life support. The loss was devastating to the entire family. Sarah posted a tribute to her brother that included the words, "Never goodbye, I'll see you soon, big bro." The defense would later try to present this post to the jury as evidence of suicidal ideation. The judge would not allow it. On March 22, 2022, nearly 2 months after Sarah's death, Dr. James Ryan was arrested and charged with murder. The charge was one that Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy acknowledged most people had never heard of. It was called depraved heart murder, a subcategory of second-degree murder under Maryland law. It does not require proving that the defendant intended to kill a victim. It requires proving that the defendant acted with extreme recklessness and a gross disregard for human life. Prosecutors argued that a trained oral surgeon who knew exactly how dangerous these drugs were, who administered them without monitoring equipment, without emergency protocols in a private home, had met that standard with every injection. The jury trial began on August 16, 2023. Prosecutors built their cases around the text messages, Rachel's binder, the autopsy results, and the testimony of Detective Iacoviello and members of Sarah's family. They called a social worker who testified that the pattern of providing drugs to control access and dependency was a hallmark of abusive relationships. They called the medical examiner who described the lethal combination of drugs found in Sarah's system. The defense argued that Sarah had played an active role in obtaining and using the drugs, that she had asked for them, that she had a documented history of mental health struggles and drug use, and that Ryan had genuinely been trying to help her rather than harm her. They pointed to her text messages asking for drugs as evidence that she was making her own choices. They noted that the medical examiner had listed her manner of death as undetermined, not homicide. Ryan did not testify. After a 2-week trial and less than 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict on August 25, 2023. Guilty of second-degree depraved heart murder, guilty of involuntary manslaughter, guilty on 2 counts of drug distribution, and 1 count of possession with intent to distribute. 3 hours for 2 weeks of testimony about a year of systematic destruction. 3 hours. In January 2024, Dr. James Ryan appeared in court for sentencing. He was allowed to speak. He addressed the court and said the words do not exist to convey the level of remorse he felt. He insisted he had not administered the fatal dose. He said he took responsibility for providing Sarah access to the drugs that killed her, but maintained he had not intended for her to die. The sentencing guidelines for his charges suggested a range of 15 to 25 years. The judge had something else in mind. She noted the severity of Sarah's injuries. She noted the length of time over which Ryan had provided drugs to a young woman who had come to him as a patient. She noted the power imbalance inherent in the relationship. She noted that the guidelines were insufficient to address the nature of what he had done. Dr. James Ryan was sentenced to 45 years in prison. With additional counts, his total sentence amounted to 45 years. At 50 years old, it is effectively a life sentence. Rachel Harris spoke at a press conference after the verdict. She was this beautiful beauty queen, Rachel said, and she wasted away at the hands of Dr. James Ryan. Sarah's mother, Tina, addressed the court at sentencing. She asked the judge to put him behind bars until his life was done. The judge complied. The conviction of James Ryan under Maryland's depraved heart murder statute drew attention from prosecutors and lawmakers across the state. Montgomery County State's Attorney John McCarthy had spent years pushing for stronger laws to hold drug suppliers accountable for overdose deaths, particularly in cases where the supplier was not a street dealer, but someone in a position of trust and medical authority. The Ryan conviction was a step forward, but McCarthy noted it remained a difficult charge to prosecute in other cases and called on the legislature to create clearer statutes. Detective Iacoviello retired after the trial. He spent his birthday reading a binder compiled by a grieving sister, and he had turned it into a murder case. He said he still thinks about Sarah often. Rachel Harris's binder, 200 pages of text messages and photographs assembled by a sister who refused to accept the official explanation, was ultimately what broke the case open. Without it, investigators had an undetermined overdose and a doctor's account. With it, they had a timeline, a pattern, and a conviction. Sarah Harris was 25 years old. She had dreamed of becoming a doctor. She had survived depression and addiction, and had rebuilt her life more than once. She spoke 4 languages. She won beauty pageants. She had a mother and a sister who loved her fiercely, enough to fight for her even after she was gone. She met James Ryan when she was 22 and went to his office to have her wisdom teeth out. He had been watching her since she was 14. Sarah Harris, 1996 to 2022. Story 4. Alexandra Pennig. December 16, 2022, St. Paul, Minnesota. At 2:50 in the morning, a 911 call came in from a residential apartment building in the Lower Town neighborhood. A man named Matthew Ecker reported that a woman had shot herself in the head. He said he had tried to help her. He said it was too late. St. Paul police officers Ching Vong and Justina Sir responded lights and sirens, along with nearly every available unit in the vicinity. They arrived at the lofts at Farmers Market apartment building at 260 East 5th Street within minutes. Ecker met them in the lobby and led them upstairs. 32-year-old Alexandra Pennig, known to everyone as Alex, was lying on her back in the bathroom with a single gunshot wound to her left temple. A handgun was resting on her left shoulder. Her left hand was on top of it. Ecker told officers what had happened. He and Alex had gone out for the evening. They had come home, everything was fine, and then she grabbed his gun, backed into the bathroom, locked the door, and fired the shot. He heard it go off. He broke down the door and found her. He tried to help. He washed his hands. He called 911. Officers noted what Ecker told them. They noted Alex's position on the floor. They noted the gun on her shoulder, her hand resting on top of it. And they noted a few things that didn't quite add up. The sink was dry. He said he washed his hands. The sink was bone dry. Alexandra Pennig had grown up in Minnesota, one of those people who filled every room she walked into. Her friends described her as spunky, feisty, and fiercely loyal. She played ice hockey as a kid and won a state championship. She was the kind of person you wanted on your team. As a young adult, she struggled. In college, she dealt with depression and got hooked on prescription pills. In 2016, she took too many medications in what her family described as a suicide attempt. She got help. She got better. Inspired by the nurses who had cared for her during her recovery, Alex went back to school. In 2019, she earned her licensed practical nursing degree and was chosen to speak at her graduation ceremony. She talked about climbing out of the darkness. She talked about wanting to be for other people what those nurses had been for her. By 2022, Alex was working as a nurse and living in her St. Paul apartment. She had a boyfriend named Shane Anderson. They had been together about 4 months and were talking about a future together, about him moving in. She also had a complicated history with the man who would call 911 the morning she died. Matthew Ecker was 45 years old, a nurse practitioner from Fergus Falls, Minnesota, nearly 3 hours from St. Paul. He was married with 4 children. He lived with his family in Fergus Falls and made the trip to St. Paul periodically. He and Alex Pennig had met in 2020 when she took a job at the walk-in clinic where he worked. They began an affair. By the time of Alex's death, the relationship had been going on for approximately 2 years. His wife had no knowledge of it. The physical part of their relationship had ended in the summer of 2022. They remained in contact as friends, Ecker said. He was a source of support for Alex during a difficult period. She had been drinking heavily, had lost several jobs, and was struggling financially. Ecker had, over the course of their relationship, given Alex approximately $28,000. He had also, as a nurse practitioner with prescribing authority, written prescriptions for her medications, including antidepressants and amphetamines, an arrangement that, while ethically questionable, was not illegal under Minnesota law. On the evening of December 15, 2022, Ecker says he received a frantic call from Alex. She told him she had been in a fight with Shane Anderson and was scared. She needed help. Ecker was on his way to work. He turned around, got his handgun, which he carried legally with a permit, and drove nearly 3 hours to St. Paul. He arrived at Alex's apartment around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Shane Anderson was not there. That evening, the two of them went out to several bars together. At 12:30 in the morning on December 16th, Alex Pennig and Matthew Ecker walked into Camp Bar in downtown St. Paul. Shane Anderson was already inside. Surveillance footage captured what happened next. Anderson walked over to Alex. Ecker approached. The situation escalated. Ecker stepped between Anderson and Alex. Anderson punched him in the face. Anderson was removed from the bar. Alex and Ecker stayed for another hour, drinking, talking. Then they walked back to her apartment building, arriving at 2:05 in the morning. Surveillance footage in the lobby caught them coming in. Then at 2:24 in the morning, it caught them leaving again. Ecker later said he went to his car to get his headphones. Alex returned first and waited in the vestibule. She appeared impatient. She was looking at her phone. Detectives who reviewed the footage later noted her body language carefully. The way she held the door, the way she moved. She looked, they said, like someone who was upset. Something had shifted between Alex and Ecker since they arrived home. Something had happened, or was happening, between the moment they walked in and the moment they walked back out. Ecker returned 2 minutes later. The footage showed the two of them walking back through the lobby together and going upstairs. That was the last time Alex Pennig was seen alive. 20 minutes later, at 2:50 in the morning, Matthew Ecker called 911. 20 minutes between the lobby and the 911 call. Whatever happened in that apartment happened in 20 minutes. Detectives Abby DeSanto and Jennifer O'Donnell took the case. They began with Ecker's account. He said Alex grabbed the gun. He said she backed into the bathroom and locked the door. He said he heard the shot and immediately broke down the door to get to her. He said he tried to render aid, applied pressure to the wound, then washed his hands and called 911. Several things did not fit. The sink was dry. If Ecker had washed his hands before calling 911, the sink handles should have blood on them. The basin should have been wet. Instead, when officers arrived, the sink showed no sign of having been used at all. Alex's feet were straddling the bathroom door. If Ecker had broken the door open after she fired the shot, her body would have been pushed, her legs swept to one side. Instead, her feet were positioned on either side of the door frame, as if the door had been open when she fell. Alex was right-handed. The gun was in her left hand. And during his interview, Ecker acknowledged he had picked up the gun, moved it to his suitcase, and then returned it to the bathroom, placing it on Alex's chest with her hand on top. When asked why, he said he had panicked. He was scared. He wanted to take it somewhere safe and then changed his mind. His DNA was not found on the gun, despite his admission that he had handled it, moved it, and placed it back. No DNA. The defense would argue this was simply how DNA transfer works, that touching something doesn't always leave a detectable trace. Prosecutors argued the gun had been wiped clean. There was no gunshot residue on Ecker's hands, face, or clothing. His defense pointed to this as evidence he had not fired the weapon. Prosecutors argued he had fired from around the doorframe, shielded from the initial blood spatter by the door itself. and had cleaned the gun before calling 911. Then detectives found the piece that brought everything together. When Alex Pennig's body was moved from the bathroom floor, investigators found something underneath her, a small metal piece. It was a component of the bathroom door lock. For it to be under Alex's body, it had to have gotten there while she was still alive. The door lock breaks when the door is forced. If the door was forced open after the shot was fired, as Ecker claimed, the metal piece would have landed on top of Alex, or beside her, not underneath her. The only way the metal piece could be beneath her body was if the door had been forced open before she was shot. Detectives DeSanto and O'Donnell believed that this was the sequence. Alex had locked the bathroom door to get away from Ecker following an argument. Ecker forced the door open, the lock broke, the metal piece fell to the bathroom floor, Alex fell on top of it when she was shot. She had not locked herself in the bathroom to take her own life. She had locked the door to get away from him. A piece of metal smaller than a coin underneath a woman on a bathroom floor, and that tiny piece told investigators everything the sink and the DNA and the surveillance footage had been building towards. During the investigation, detectives formed a theory about why Matthew Ecker would have wanted Alex Pennig dead. She knew everything. She knew about his marriage, his children, the years of financial support, the prescriptions he had written for her. She had a new boyfriend she was happy with, Shane Anderson. She was talking about him moving in. She was moving on. And Shane Anderson had punched Matthew Ecker in the face an hour before Alex was killed. Detectives believed Ecker may have feared what Alex might do with everything she knew, that she might tell his wife that the life he had maintained, the family in Fergus Falls, the affair in St. Paul, was about to unravel. Ecker's defense attorney called it sheer speculation. There was, he said, not one piece of direct evidence connecting any of this to a motive for murder. He argued Alex had been in a dark place, struggling financially, drinking heavily, grieving, depressed. He pointed to text messages she had sent Ecker just days before her death, saying she had lost her will to live. He brought in a forensic pathologist who agreed with the medical examiner that Alex's manner of death was undetermined, not homicide. He told the jury this was a case about what they chose to believe, suicide or murder. The jury chose. Matthew Ecker's trial began February 8, 2024 at the Ramsey County Courthouse in St. Paul. After 9 days of testimony and 9 hours of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict on February 16, 2024. Guilty of second-degree intentional murder. On April 3, 2024, Matthew Ecker was sentenced to 30 years in prison. He received credit for 57 days already served. His family maintained and continues to maintain that he is innocent. His defense filed an appeal arguing the evidence was insufficient to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Ecker had fired the shot and that the physical evidence was consistent with suicide. On January 6, 2026, the Minnesota Court of Appeals issued a unanimous decision. The appeal was denied. The conviction stands. Ecker and his wife are now divorced. He has had no contact with his 4 children. He drove 3 hours in the middle of the night because she said she was scared. That much everyone agrees on. What happened in that apartment in the 20 minutes between the lobby and the 911 call, that is what the jury decided, and what the appeals court affirmed. Alex Pennig was 32 years old. She had fought her way back from depression and addiction and had stood at a podium at her nursing graduation and told her story to the people about her. She had wanted to be for others what the nurses who helped her had been for her. She had a boyfriend who was planning to move in. She had 2 cats. She had friends who still pick up the phone to call her before remembering she won't answer. Her parents visit her grave as often as they can. Her mother, Mary Jo, says she can hear Alex telling her it's okay.